We've all been there. We get caught up in the excitement and hype of a video game. We read every article and piece together every scrap of information the developers give us and decide this is going to be the best game ever. We pre-order, we finally get the game, and it doesn't come even close to meeting our expectations. In this video, we explore just a few of those frustrating titles. Be sure to subscribe to The Gamer and hit the notify button so you can level up with new videos daily. Here we go! Duke Nukem Forever. When Duke Nukem 3D hit the shelves in 1996, it was an instant hit. A year later in 97, Duke Nukem Forever was announced for release well before Christmas of 1998. Game developer George Broussard saw Duke Nukem as a character that would be around for 30 years or more. George refused to settle for anything less than perfection. The game had to be recoded several times as newer and more powerful game engines were released by other companies. A second trailer was released at E3 in 2001 and it looked awesome. Fans couldn't wait to get their hands on the game, but it still wasn't even close to being finished. Finally, in 2009, 3D Realms announced they were no longer creating any video games, so fans gave up any hope of getting to play Duke Nukem Forever, until it actually was released. Gearbox had purchased the IP to Duke Nukem and put out the game in 2011. And the game was less than worth the wait. It was an outdated concept and focused more on the humor than actual gameplay. This was probably the worst offense of the game, because the crass jokes which had been so popular in 1996 were simply cringeworthy in 2011. Just like bowl cuts, jelly shoes, and eating purple ketchup. Ah, the good old days. Assassin's Creed Unity. Assassin's Creed is an immensely popular series, and when fans found out Assassin's Creed Unity, set during the French Revolution, would be exclusive to PC, PS4, and Xbox One, they assumed it would use all the technology the newest gaming consoles had to offer. They couldn't wait to see how the games would push these consoles and PCs to their limits and provide an experience that just couldn't be contained to older, less powerful machines. As it turns out, the specs of the newest consoles were used pretty much just for the size of the crowds of non-playable characters, which were impressive, but they were around every street corner. The backdrop became boring real fast. The crowds lost their appeal, and the tasks players had to complete were just so repetitive. The game was also super glitchy. Despite the fact that Unity didn't have features that were much different from the previous 6 Assassin's Creed games, Ubisoft struggled with visual stutters, clipping issues, and animation mistakes. In one glitch, faces of characters wouldn't show up, but their hair, eyes, teeth, and accessories would, which is honestly horrifying to look at. Kind of like the receipt that reminded us just how much we spent on this lackluster game. No Man's Sky. The long-awaited No Man's Sky may be one of the most ambitious entries on this list, at least according to what gamers were promised during development. No Man's Sky is a game that captured everyone's imagination for one reason. It promised infinite variety to explore. Using permutations to create 18 quintillion unique planets in the game meant endless gameplay possibilities. Sean Murray of Hello Games had a long list of features that excited gamers, including functioning planetary physics, large-scale space battles, and significant player-made disruptions to the game. Basically, Hello Games and game developer Sean Murray promised players an immersive space exploration experience that would make everyone feel like they had stepped right into their very own space-time odyssey. However, the problem with 18 quintillion possibilities taking up only 2.6 gigabytes of bandwidth on your PC meant one thing and one thing only. The permutations of the planets, structures, and species were incredibly repetitive. Once players finally got to play the game, the only thing they discovered was exactly how overhyped this game truly was. The planets didn't seem to have any rhyme or reason for their placement in a solar system, and had similar base structures on every single one. No Man's Sky turned out to be no man's favorite game. Aliens Colonial Marines. In 2006, Sega announced that they had acquired the rights to make video games based on the cinematic masterpiece of the series, Aliens. They said they were going to make 2 games right out of the gate, a first-person shooter and an RPG. In 2013, the first-person shooter game was released to an underwhelmed fan base, and the RPG had been scrapped altogether. So what went wrong in those 7 years? Well, Sega had originally tagged Gearbox to do the FPS, but overwhelmed with titles like Duke Nukem Forever, Borderlands, and Borderlands 2, Gearbox decided to bring in Timegate. Having 3 companies involved with the development of one game turned out about as well as you'd expect it to. There were too many cooks in the kitchen, arguing about differences of opinion in gaming philosophy, workflow, and what exactly the game should be. There was also the small problem that that in 4 years, Gearbox had somehow neglected to lock down a finalized script for the game. Because of this, development for the script and for the game itself were happening concurrently, which led to scenes and levels having to be left on the cutting room floor as the story changed constantly. What we ended up with was a lackluster, unchallenging first-person shooter with the occasional fun Easter egg for fans of the movies. Pokemon Go. Google is well known for its April Fool's pranks. On April 1st, 2014, the Maps app was updated to include a feature which allowed users to capture Pokemon as they drove or walked around real-world locations. In September of 2015, it was announced that this fun joke would become a real game, Pokemon Go. When the app was finally available for the public in July of 2016, it took the world by storm and flooded Niantic's servers. Glitches, bugs, and crashes were not just an occasional inconvenience, but the normal experience of becoming a Pokemon master. At first, these problems did not discourage players from trying to catch them all. As accidents started to happen due to players attempting to use the game while driving or following Pokemon into dangerous areas, the game got a bad reputation. This, along with the server issues and some key features being missing from the game, led to a decline in its popularity. Many players were also frustrated by region-locked Pokemon, which could only be caught in certain areas across the globe. Niantic is currently trying to entice players to come back to the game by having holiday-centric events, with the promise of trading and PvP on the horizon. Time can only tell if they are able to regain the popularity they had last year. Daikatana. In the gaming world, there is perhaps no bigger punchline and no bigger flop than Daikatana. Game developer John Romero was a rock star in the gaming world of the 1990s. When he left id Software to co-found Ion Storm and announced that he would be creating a time-traveling epic with an intelligent sidekick, gamers lost their minds with excitement. Ion Storm, however, had a serious money problem. Their office rent was $1.1 million per month, which included an in-office movie theater. There were also a ton of email leaks from the company, and the transcripts read like the world's nerdiest soap opera. People were leaving the company left and right. In fact, the turnover got to a point that half the dialogue for the game was recorded pronouncing Kage's name wrong because the team had never heard the name of the main antagonist of the game said aloud. Another huge problem for the game was John Romero's big mouth. He bragged about specific settings, weapons, and monsters before the game was completed, so they couldn't take those things out of the game, even if they weren't working. The marketing campaign was overly aggressive. After all that John Romero had said and promised, Daikatana had to be the perfect video game, and it ended up being completely mediocre. E.T. One of the most beloved movies of the early 1980s was Steven Spielberg's E.T., and after the success of their partnership with Spielberg for their Indiana Jones game, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Atari was clamoring to capitalize on E.T. They wanted to team up with the director once again to release an accompanying video game for the Christmas season. They believed that the highest-grossing film of the time would lead to huge commercial success. However, Atari waited a long time to negotiate the licensing rights to the movie with Spielberg. Atari ended up paying $22 million for the rights in July of 1982, and in order to have the lucrative Christmas rollout they desired, they needed to have the game done by September 1st. This left game developer Howard Scott Warshaw just 5 weeks to create the entire game from start to finish, which is insane. It's madness. Needless to say, the game was plagued with glitches and poor game design from the get-go. Even so, Atari had around 4 million game cartridges produced and set a price point of $40, which in today's money would be around $102. There were so many cartridges of the almost unplayable game returned and left unsold that Atari literally had them buried and covered in concrete in the New Mexico desert. Sonic the Hedgehog, 2006. One of the most beloved video games of the 1990s was Sonic the Hedgehog. Gamers loved the empowering speed with which Sonic dashed through each level, collecting rings and avoiding obstacles. So, we had high expectations when Sonic was set to step into the next generation of gaming in its first 3D game for its 15th anniversary in 2006. Released for the Xbox 360 and PS3, Sega pushed Sonic Team to put out the game on a tight deadline, some say before it was even properly finished. As such, gameplay was full of glitches and long load times, the opposite of the lightning speed that makes the series so popular. Sonic himself accelerates slowly and only really gains velocity by passing over speed pads, and the levels slow down the game even more with environmental hazards and enemies, creating a tedious hurry-up-and-wait gaming experience. And while being able to switch between Sonic, Tails, and Silver added at least a little bit of variety, none of them stood out enough to make the game exciting. If you ask us, Sega and the Sonic team should have concentrated on bringing the 2D game to life in 3D, and saved the new elements and content for the next Sonic game, because this version left gamers feeling dread for what the new generation of Sonic the Hedgehog might look like. Mighty Number 9. Through crowdfunding, we can make the game exactly as we envision it. The Kickstarter page for Mighty Number 9 claimed, after years of uninspiring retro remakes, MMOs, and spin-offs, fans were thrilled to hear that there would be a spiritual continuation of the Mega Man series. So thrilled, in fact, that the Kickstarter campaign for the game, which had an original goal of $900,000, reached $4 million by the end of its funding window. The page had detailed profiles on the game developers, most of whom had worked on the original Mega Man games, as well as detailed concept art, explanation of different gameplay elements, and the basics of the storyline. Fans rejoiced. And then the game came out. Instead of an authentic Mega Man continuation, it felt more like a bad fan film. Sure, it had many similar elements to the games we know and loved, but the voice acting, textures, and cutscenes left a lot to be desired. Beck lacked the bold and exciting nature we had hoped for from the concept art. The game looked nothing like the concept screenshot that the game developers had released to us. And perhaps worst of all, the game had shining moments when we thought maybe, just maybe, this game could have been what we wanted it to be. Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2. Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2 was the second installment of the series, released in 2010. Fans wondered how LucasArts would follow up the previous game, seeing as how the first game wrapped up rather nicely. We played as Darth Vader's secret apprentice, Starkiller, who died at the end of the first game. So who would gamers be playing as in the second game? Also Starkiller, or at least a clone of Starkiller who breaks free from Darth Vader in search of his love interest, Juno Eclipse. And well, that's pretty much it. The downfall of this game is that the storyline is confused and doesn't really go anywhere. Kind of like that trilogy of Star Wars films that we don't really like to talk about. There are two endings, each more of a letdown than the last. One violates Star Wars canon, taking Darth Vader prisoner on your ship and flying off with Juno. In the other, you try to kill Vader, but instead are killed yourself, and as you lay dying, Darth Vader explains that there is yet another Starkiller clone, rendering the entire game you just played pointless. The meandering storyline and overpowered force dynamics are really disappointing, because the game looks gorgeous, but a beautiful setting can't hide a boring video game. I guess this was not the sequel we were looking for. While all of these games were developed with the best of intentions, in the end they just weren't what we expected them to be. From giant flops to games that were just kind of okay, every game on this list failed to live up to what we had hyped them up to be. Were you taken surprised by any of these 10 overhyped games? Which one were you the most excited for? Let us know in the comments below. We hope you enjoyed our list more than you did the games in it, and make sure to like this video and subscribe to The Gamer for our latest content. Have a good one.